Hey there, Alan Matthews from Classical Guitar Shed here, and in this video we're going to talk about that top 5 to 10% of your pieces. You've been playing your piece, you've gotten it pretty good, you know the notes, but it's just not quite there. It could be a little bit better. How do you get that top 5 or 10%? That's what we're going to talk about. So when we start learning a piece, our main foci, are getting the notes, getting our fingers to go where they need to go, right? Learning the music, maybe getting in some muscle memory, ideally memorizing the music. These are the main things that we're thinking about, right? Well, as we get to a high performance level, those things are just taken for granted. Like, of course we know the notes. Of course our fingers can play the notes. So now what? So then the question becomes not what we're doing, what notes and what fingers, but it becomes how. It becomes, how am I playing this? How am I phrasing it? How am I balancing it? Is some notes louder? Are some notes louder than other notes? These become more musical issues at the highest levels of playing. So depending on our current musical level and what we know in our experience and who we've been studying with and all these different things, then we'll have different ideas as far as what is possible on that upper 5%. And as far as musically goes, we'll have different devices and tricks. We'll have different ideas about how our dynamics, swells, fades, louds, softs should work. All of this, what notes should pop out and which notes shouldn't. So all of these things, and that's why music is such a wonderful lifelong endeavor, is because we constantly get better at these things and we constantly have more ideas that we can work on at these high levels. So to begin with, we're just learning notes. We're just getting the what, right? Well, to get to the upper 5%, we have to work on the how. And so one of the ways then is we have to get the notes and the technical aspects of it to where it's consistently clean, right? That's the ideal, is that we don't trip over our dress every time that we hit that one tricky spot, right? And so then the way that we do this, and this is also the same for musical issues as well, be it I want to swell here and fade right here, I want these particular notes to pop out. So the way that we do that is through a whole lot of honest listening. And we can do this through videoing or recording ourselves and listening back. But the main thing is that, one, we get off score as much as possible. So even if we're not gonna memorize the music entirely, if there's a tricky spot that we're working on, we need to memorize that, because that's going to make it a whole lot easier to work through and to work on as well. So then whenever we do know that, okay, here's this tricky spot. Let's say it's this melody of Capriccio. So this is this melody, and let's say that that's really tricky for me. Something's just not working, right? So then what's going to happen to get up to the top percent, then we need to ask ourselves some questions. We want to make sure for each note of that section, do I know what's melody, what's not melody, what's bass, what's accompaniment, right? So do I have my voices, and can I play them separately, right? Can I play my hands separately? It's really tricky if without looking at the music sometimes, but and can I phrase that just exactly like I want it? Do I want it all static? Do I want some swells and fades? What's going to happen as I get to the end of that little phrase? Or do I want to do something different with the last few notes? So all of these kind of questions, we can really put the microscope on our little sections. What's our bass? And how do I want to phrase that? So all of a sudden, instead of practicing the piece, these are my notes, then we're taking it apart and we're looking at each one and we're practicing differently than we practiced before. And that's one of the main points I'd like to make here, is that practicing at the upper levels, we practice differently than we practice for that lower 80 or 90%. As a friend of mine likes to say, what gets you out of Egypt won't get you to the promised land. So as we practice and as we get better at practicing, then we can notice the things that are going to trip us up later and do them earlier. And so it does turn into a thing. So then the more practice techniques that we know, how do we practice rhythms? Are there ways to make dotted rhythms instead of... That would be a dotted rhythm. Make it lilt. offset it. All these different kind of things that we can do with the rhythm, with the tone, with the dynamics, which is the louds and softs and swells and fades, with the articulation, short notes versus long notes, very connected notes. So there's all these different areas, and we can learn practice techniques for these. We can make exercises out of any sort of technical issue and work on that. So the main thing is that we're not practicing the piece, we're practicing the issues. We're practicing to fix the problems. And oftentimes, then we encounter what I like to call Medusa problems. Medusa, the lady with the snakes for hair, and if you look directly at her, then you turn to stone. And so then that way, the only way to fight a Medusa problem is by tangents, by coming from the sides, coming from all directions. And that's how these practice is. So then practicing just the melody alone and listening to the exact phrasing that we want on it, getting the exact right timing and the timing on the ornament and everything just the way we want it, and then doing that with other parts, then putting it back together. All these different things work together, and each one of them can be very simple. It's simple to play, right? It's simple to play a single note line, but we do that for all these different things, and it becomes one of these, it conquers the Medusa. So oftentimes, once we get our phrasing worked out, then a lot of the technical problems will disappear, which is a really magical thing. Because oftentimes, if we get very clear on how exactly we want to phrase something, a lot of the technical issues and challenges will clear up. And so then we can use musical solutions for technical problems. But, and here's a big but, we never get musical solutions just by focusing on technical problems. So the opposite doesn't work. Even if it's completely clean and we've got all of our tricky spots to where every single note is absolutely clean, that doesn't mean it's beautiful. That doesn't mean that it's being played well. It just means that we've got all the notes clean. But that's just the starting point. So to get to that top 5%, then it means making musical decisions about every single note in the entire piece, knowing the role. Is it the main point? Is it an arrival point? Is it moving us to an arrival point? Is it connecting one phrase to the next? Like what each note, what is the purpose and the role of that note within the whole scheme of things? Just like with my speech, what I'm talking about right now, every single word has a function. There are no random refrigerator words that just come out of nowhere that don't mean anything. That's all within a context, and it's all leading towards making a particular point. And the exact same thing with every single note in our pieces. Every single note has a role and needs to move us there. So then our goal in getting to the top levels of playing is to figure out and decide on the role of each note. And oftentimes there's not just one right answer to this. There's a number of ways that we can interpret music. That's one of the creativity points of classical guitar. Classical guitar is creative in the way that we practice and how we solve problems. And then it's also creative in the way that we decide the roles of each note and how we're going to let the music flow out of the instrument. So in the top 5%, we do things differently. How do we do things differently? In a million different ways. But as we practice, we can look for new ways to practice problems, try different things, experiment freely, and just make a mess so that then it can come back together and clean it up. So hope this has helped. It's not an easy process, but recording and videoing and listening back to see, are my ideas actually coming out of the instrument? Am I hearing what it is that I'm trying to do? Is there a point where I don't know what I'm trying to do? Because if that's the case, then I need to figure out something and then do it and exaggerate it. So hope this has helped. Super fun. This is the hard work. This is why so few people actually bring their pieces to this level of playing, is because it's hard work and it takes a lot of time. So good luck. Stay with it. It's really rewarding. And please subscribe to this channel if you have not. And I would love to see you soon. Bye.